The Falklands War is one of the shortest but most fascinating conflicts of the modern era. Lasting just 74 days in 1982, it was a fast-moving showdown fought thousands of miles from Britain, sparked by a long-standing territorial dispute that suddenly erupted into open warfare. For many people, the Falklands War is a conflict they've heard about but don't fully understand. Why were two nations separated by an entire ocean fighting over a group of sparsely populated islands? What made the war escalate so quickly? And how did Britain manage to launch a massive military operation across the world and win? In this breakdown, we'll make everything crystal clear, exploring the causes, battles, strategies, and political consequences that shaped the Falklands War. The story begins in the 19th century, when Britain formally took control of the Falkland Islands, an isolated archipelago in the South Atlantic with a small population and a strategic location near shipping routes. Argentina, however, always claimed the islands, which they call the Malvinas, arguing that they inherited them from Spain. For over a century, the dispute simmered diplomatically but never erupted into violence. Britain administered the islands, the population aligned with British culture, and the issue became one of those unresolved historical disagreements hanging in the background. But by the late 1970s and early 1980s, the political landscapes in both Argentina and the United Kingdom created the conditions for conflict. In Argentina, the ruling military junta led by General Leopoldo Galtieri was losing public support. The country was struggling with a collapsing economy, human rights abuses, and growing domestic protests. A quick military victory, the junta believed, could spark national unity and restore public confidence. The Falklands, viewed as historically Argentine territory, became a tempting target. Meanwhile in Britain, Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher faced economic crises and increasing political pressure. Although the majority of islanders wanted to remain British, many officials in London viewed the Falklands as expensive to defend and strategically insignificant. Some signals from Britain suggested it wasn't fully committed to defending the islands, which further emboldened the Argentine leadership. On April 2, 1982, Argentina made its move. Argentine forces invaded the Falklands, quickly overwhelming the small British garrison stationed there. The Argentine flag was raised, and Galtieri declared the islands reclaimed. Crowds in Buenos Aires celebrated wildly, and the military government believed it had achieved a major political triumph. But the reaction from the United Kingdom was swift and determined. For Thatcher, the invasion was not only a violation of British territory but also a test of national resolve. She vowed to retake the islands, sparking one of the most ambitious military operations in modern British history. Within days, Britain assembled a massive naval task force and sent it on an 8,000-mile journey to the South Atlantic. This alone was a logistical feat. The British Navy mobilized aircraft carriers, destroyers, frigates, submarines, troop ships, helicopters, and supply vessels. The idea of launching a military campaign in such a remote location was risky, but Britain had no intention of backing down. The world watched as the task force sailed south, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation. Before British forces even reached the islands, the first shots were fired beneath the surface. On May 2, the British submarine HMS Conqueror detected and sank the Argentine cruiser General Belgrano. Over 300 Argentine sailors died, and the attack became one of the most controversial moments of the war. Argentina responded with a major air campaign, targeting the British fleet with fast, low-flying jets armed with bombs and missiles. These air attacks would shape much of the conflict, as Argentina's pilots demonstrated tremendous bravery and skill, even when facing advanced British defenses. The British fleet soon faced its own tragedies. On May 4, the British destroyer HMS Sheffield was struck by an Argentine Exocet missile, becoming the first Royal Navy ship sunk in combat since World War II. Several other British vessels, including the Sir Galahad and HMS Ardent, were lost to airstrikes. Every ship sunk was a major blow, not just militarily but psychologically, as the vulnerability of the British fleet became brutally clear. The South Atlantic turned into a deadly battleground of jets, missiles, and ships. As the task force approached the islands, air superiority became crucial. Britain relied heavily on its Sea Harrier jets, which despite being outnumbered proved highly effective. Their ability to take off vertically from small carriers gave Britain a major advantage. Dogfights over the islands and the surrounding seas became a daily occurrence, with both sides pushing their pilots to the limit. Once Britain secured a foothold offshore, it began preparing for the amphibious landings. On May 21st, British troops landed at San Carlos Water. Establishing a beachhead, Argentine aircraft bombarded the landing zone, turning the area into what British soldiers grimly nicknamed Bomb Alley. Despite fierce attacks, the landings were successful. British forces began their march across the rugged terrain of East Falkland, heading toward the main settlements of Goose Green and Port Stanley. One of the first major land battles took place at Goose Green, where British paratroopers faced a well-entrenched Argentine force. The fighting was intense and costly. Lieutenant Colonel H. Jones, the British commander, was killed in action and later awarded the Victoria Cross. After nearly 14 hours of fighting, the Argentine garrison surrendered, marking a significant victory that boosted British morale. As British troops pushed eastward, the battles grew more intense. The terrain was harsh, cold, wet, and unforgiving, with soldiers carrying heavy loads across mountains and peat bogs. Night assaults became common, with British forces attacking Argentine positions using stealth, discipline, and close-quarters combat. Battles at Mount Longdon, His Sisters, and Mount Tumbledown were some of the fiercest of the war, marked by bravery on both sides and significant casualties. By mid-June, British forces had surrounded Port Stanley, the capital of the islands and the final Argentine stronghold. The Argentines, facing ammunition shortages, exhaustion, and overwhelming British pressure, were unable to hold the line. On June 14, 1982, the Argentine commander in Port Stanley surrendered. The war was over, the islands were back under British control, and British troops raised the Union Jack over Government House. The political consequences were immediate and far-reaching. In Britain, Margaret Thatcher's popularity skyrocketed. The successful military campaign transformed her political career and played a major role in her re-election. In Argentina, the defeat shattered the military junta's credibility. Public outrage grew, protests surged, and within a year, the dictatorship collapsed, paving the way for the country's return to democracy. The Falklands War offers several lasting lessons. It demonstrates how territorial disputes, especially those tied to national identity, can escalate rapidly. It highlights the logistical challenges of long-distance warfare. It shows the importance of air power, naval strategy, and adaptability. And it reveals how domestic politics often drives international conflicts more than strategic necessity. Although the war lasted only 74 days, its legacy continues. Britain strengthened its military presence on the islands, and Argentina maintains its claim to this day. For historians and military analysts, the Falklands War remains a clear case study of swift escalation, political risk, and the unpredictable nature of war. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want more deep-dive explanations of major historical conflicts, be sure to subscribe, like the video, and tell me which war you want covered next. Understanding history makes today's world easier to understand, and this channel is here to bring you clear, engaging explanations of the past.